Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden. We're going to do an unboxing today with some shrubs I've got sent from Proven Winners and Great Garden Plants. I'm really excited. There are a lot of things in here that are new coming to the market. There are some things that I've grown before. There are some things that are already in the garden, but I love them so much that I wanted some more of them to put around. So I think there's about 30 total, so it's going to take me a little bit to unbox all of these. I'm going to show you a little bit of the unboxing, but obviously not all 30 because that would be really boring. And then we'll go over the variety type, so give me a moment. So if you order plants from Great Garden Plants, they come packaged just like this in boxes that are in the bigger boxes here. They're packed really good. I've never had anything damaged or that arrived damaged from them. And they have these nice pull away places to pull the top off. I don't tend to use that method. I personally, because these, as you'll notice in this plant here, are so nicely packaged and have a plastic around the root ball so the soil doesn't fall out. I like to cut the top and cut the bottom, and then you can collapse these boxes down nicely to fit in your recycling if you're recycling them, or if you're into cardboard mulching and reusing these in your garden, they work perfectly for that purpose too. So here's the plant, and you can see it's got a plastic container or a plastic bag around the container, and this is a new azalea, Perfecto Mundo coral, I think. Look at that. That looks really great. So these are 1 gallon plants, and then after you've cut the boxes open, they just fold perfectly flat, and then you could cut a slit and use it for cardboard mulching. That works really well too. So nearly everything I do throughout my life, including in the garden, is an assembly line process. So I normally would not open one plant and take it completely out. I pull them out all out of their boxes, then I go after and cut off all of these plastic bags afterwards. Because they're so well packaged, they're kind of difficult to get cleaned up after they arrive, but I found the best way. There's a really tough staple here that holds this bag on so it's not going anywhere in shipment. The easiest method is to get you a really heavy duty pair of scissors and cut the twist off of that bag, and then that will allow you to open the bag up and pull it away from the plant just like this, and then you have this perfect plant here. So I'm going to go through that assembly line process and go ahead and open all these boxes and then cut all the bags off of it and then break everything down, and then I'll show you all of the plants at the end. All right, I am new to some of these plants. Some I've grown before, as I mentioned, so I have the tags with me I'm going to read off of. The first one, since it's the first one I unboxed and happened to be so stunning, is this Perfecto Mundo Epic Coral Color Azalea. Now, these are reblooming azaleas, so they'll bloom for you in the spring and again in late summer or fall. What's interesting about azaleas is they are typically more a southern climate plant. They like a little more acidic soil, so this is going to be a test of growing them here. I've tried to grow azaleas before in my garden, none of the Perfecto Mundo series. So we're going to be fertilizing these probably immediately with some acid-loving fertilizer, and then again in the spring to keep the pH down. And Perfecto Mundo gets roughly 3 to 4 foot tall and 3 to 5 foot wide, so it is a pretty big azalea, or can be a big azalea. I'm going to be planting this most likely in the border, the shrub border behind the fence. It's hardy in zone 6 through 9, so a lot of azaleas are also marginally hardy to that zone 6. This one's listed as a zone 6, and they're evergreens. So if you're a southerner, you may be used to azaleas. Us in the north or in Ohio probably are not so much as used to them, but a gorgeous variety and the perfect color that I love for an azalea. Now the second one that I wish I had the camera running when I unboxed it, because I literally gasped. I was like, it is the soft serve chemiaciferous. Look at the texture on this and how it flows in the wind. Really stunning, never grown it before, really excited to get it in the garden. And this is going to be going in the front yard. So after I plant some more of my deciduous trees, I'm going to start incorporating some evergreens, and this is going to be one of them. But I'm going to wait till probably in October when hopefully the weather's cooled down a little bit and we're getting a little more rainfall, because we're in a drought right now. I don't want to subject any of these small plants to that. Soft serve is hardy in zones 4 through 8, so a pretty broad range of hardiness there. And it can get 6 to 10 foot tall and 5 to 6 foot wide. So it's a nice smaller evergreen to tuck in almost anywhere that's very upright. But remember that evergreens never stop growing. So although there's sizing guidelines on the tag, place it where it's not necessarily near the house where it will continue to grow and interfere with any of your siding or anything like that. So out in the yard, it will make a perfect textural element that will stay evergreen all year. Look at this, just love it. Now the next shrub that I'm going to be trialing out that I'm really excited, you'll see that I'm going to be planting a lot of shrubs this fall that are southern leaning, shrubs that are typically not found here in the north, or they're marginally hardy or hardy just down to zone 6, because I want to incorporate some of those southern elements. Well, there's been a lot of breakthroughs in breeding recently with Vitex, and Vitex is very much a southern shrub slash tree. They can get very large. This is a new one called Rock Steady, and it the tag says it's hardy down to 5B to 9. So that's extra hardiness that is a good, indicator for us that it's going to do well here. Now the sizing says 4 to 12 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. So this one's very upright. But the interesting thing about being in a northern zone with a Vitex is it's probably going to die back some over winter, so it can stay smaller. This one shouldn't get the size that it's estimated on the tag of 12 foot tall. But we're going to be testing it over the years to see how well it does. It will be pretty exposed. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to put it in the front garden since it should die down, or if I want to hedge a little more to put it on the back shrub border in case it gets larger. Still thinking about it, but it will probably end up front as a beautiful element there. Vitex are really excellent pollinator plants. They produce very much like butterfly bush type blooms, and they're just really striking for the landscape. So I'm happy that we can now start adding them to our northern landscapes. You'll note that Vitex is also deer resistant. So Proven Winners has released their new deer-proof line. These are lines of plants or plants that are highly deer resistant. Now, any plant might get deer damage depending on how hungry the deer are, but these are plants that are most likely not going to be bothered for deer for any reasons that they may just taste bad. The texture of the foliage may not be palatable for them. But there's a lot of plants here that I have are in the deer-proof line. So look for, if you have deer issues, the deer-proof symbol on the side of the can there. That will be an indication that it will do better in your yard if you have issues with deer. So this plant right here, as you can see, is a stunner, and it is called Paisley Pup Leucothoe, which the common name is dog hobble, which I found leucothoe a little bit easier to say than dog hobble. But these typically like a little more acidic soil conditions too, so we're going to be fertilizing it similarly with an acid-loving fertilizer like I was telling you about the azalea. Hardy in zones 5 through 8, 3 to 4 foot tall, 4 to 5 foot wide. I've been waiting to get this one. I couldn't order it from Great Garden Plants in the spring. I don't think it was available yet when I placed my order earlier in the spring, but I'm excited to have this in the garden. Really stunning introduction with gorgeous variegated foliage. Now, let's talk about another southern leaning plant that you don't find up here very often, and that is a crepe myrtle. Proven Winners has released a line called Center Stage that grows really well up here, and these are not tree form crepe myrtle necessarily. They could get really tall in the south, but up here in Ohio, they will die back a little bit and they'll be like a perfect shrub form. So this is Center Stage coral. You can see how dark the foliage is there. That's really nice. Probably going to be placing this in the front garden bed based on it's supposed to stay a little smaller. So it's hardy from 6B to 10, so it's marginally hardy in zone 6. Here, I think it'll be fine. It'll be at the front of the house. That's one of the reasons I wanted to place it there, so it can be protected some from the winds we get in winter from the west. And it gets 6 to 12 foot tall and 8 foot wide. Now, like I said, that's most likely a more warm climate towards the south that it would get that tall. Here, they're supposed to stay a little smaller, so that's something we'll be testing out. Beautiful foliage. It's not listed as deer-proof, but a stunning addition to your landscape. Now let's talk about Potentilla. So Potentilla is not something that was really on my radar until earlier this year, and I find out that they are also pretty deer resistant, not because this one's not in a deer-proof container, by the way, but the tag does list deer-proof, because the foliage is kind of soft and velvety and deer do not like that texture in their mouth. But this is Happy Face Orange. You can see the little orange bloom there. Really beautiful shrubs that bloom for you all summer. So they produce tiny little blooms, but they're really striking in the landscape. They don't require a whole lot of care. They're pretty drought resistant after they get established, and this one, and they all stay pretty small, so they're good for about anyone to tuck in their landscape. So this one gets roughly 1.5 to 2.5 foot tall, 2 to 3 foot wide, super hardy, zone 2 to 7. So if you're like way up there in Canada or down towards the top part of Alabama, you could plant this in your landscape. They start blooming closer to summer rather than spring, but once they do, they bloom through frost. You can see this tiny one right here, although it's only a 1 gallon, is already producing blooms for the season. All right, this is a new deutzia called Yuki Kabuki, which is a mouthful. Yuki Kabuki is a larger deutzia to the Proven Winners collection, has really beautiful variegated flowers. They're like pink and white. Gets roughly 4 to 5 foot tall and wide, I think. It says 2.5 to 4 foot tall and wide, so it could depend on its growing conditions, and hardy in zones 5 through 8. Deutzia are interesting because they're related to hydrangeas. So they bloom earlier than hydrangeas typically do in the spring. They're one of the early bloomers. And then you could pair it with a hydrangea to get later blooms and have blooms all in an area at the same time. I had several at the last garden. You see cherry blossom, did really well. Don't plant it where it gets a lot of water overspray. I originally planted it underneath the fountain at the last house, and it didn't love that. But when I moved it, they started really proliferating and doing really well. So I'm excited to add this one to the garden this season, and it will probably go up front in the front flower bed. This is a new rose of Sharon that's coming out in the next year called 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 Pink Ink, and it's really stunning. It has white blooms with like center pink veining, which is different for a rose of Sharon in Proven Winners collections. Hardy in zones 5 through 9, 5 to 8 foot tall and 4 foot wide. And I've heard that this one looks really stunning in the landscape. A lot of rose of Sharon's kind of weird structures. This one's supposed to be really nice and upright and kind of move in the breeze. We don't have any blooms to show you, but like and subscribe and stick around and we can show you some of these because it has some buds coming on. Now this next one is one that was cut back. So if you order from Great Garden Plants and the plant is too big to fit in a container, they may cut it back, but that's perfectly fine. It's actually probably encouraged as you're planting this time of year to cut back some of the stuff anyway, so it can have time to set roots and it's not focusing on supporting its upper growth. So if you get it and it looks like this, no worries. This is low scape Snowfire Aonia, which is commonly known as chokeberry. Chokeberries I have loved the past couple years. I've started incorporating a lot of them into the garden. They bloom early in spring with little white blooms, kind of like a service berry, and they're really stunning. Proven Winners has, I think, 3 in their collection. There's Ground Hug, which is a small ground cover one that will slowly spread out a little bit in the garden and is helpful for erosion control. This is a smaller one called Low Scape Snowfire, and it only gets 3 to 4 foot tall and wide. And they're just really stunning. They have great fall color. They produce the little tiny berries that would be nice for birds. And then in the spring, they have their white blooms. So a really early, nice bloomer for you to add to your garden. This one will probably go around the shrub border, and I'm excited to incorporate it. Next, I have 2 butterfly bushes, one that is not newer to the market that I've grown before, and one that is newer. The first one is Amethyst, and this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, butterfly bushes. It has the most stunning blue to purple colored blooms, and the interesting thing about Pugster is the blooms get so fat. They're really cute in cut flower arrangements. I've used it for that before, and they stay really short. So Pugster Amethyst only gets roughly 2 foot tall and wide, and that's similar with all the Pugster series. They all stay under that 2.5, 3 foot tall or shorter. They do tend to die back a little bit here in Southwest Ohio over winter, and they are late to wake up. So if you're planted one before and you're like, oh no, this is dead, do not pull it out yet. Wait for them to wake up. Plant them a little high because they like free draining soil, especially if you're in clay soil conditions. They don't want to sit around in water. They will not do good that way. But Amethyst has been a really successful one for me in my garden. The new one that I requested is Pugster Pinker, which is an improved variety and has pinker blooms. So this one also only gets about the same 2.5 foot tall-ish size as well. Hardy in zones 5 through 9, so a really broad range of hardiness as well. And I'm excited to try this one in the garden and see how it performs compared to Amethyst. So I have a few favorite 𝗟𝗂𝗲𝗲s, and I recommend 𝗟𝗂𝗲𝗲s for those of us in Southwest Ohio because traditionally we couldn't grow like azaleas and rhododendrons because of our pH soil. You know, I'm trying some of those on this property to see how they perform. They bloom early in the spring around the same time as rhododendrons and azaleas. And there's some beautiful breeding being done out there that has created some very interesting foliage. So despite the blooms you may get in spring, you'll get beautiful foliage all year round on some of these. And one of those is Midnight Sun, which I had in the last garden. It's a perfect shrub alternative to a Coleus annual that you might be planting in your garden year round for color in the spring. The color on this foliage varies wildly depending on the temperature and the time of year. In the last garden I had seen purple colors, almost tones of blue right now in fall. This one's kind of getting some red. It primarily mostly turns a little red, but when it's transitioning through those colors, you get a lot of other interesting colors. It stays short, about 1.5 foot tall and wide, and just a really interesting front of the border plant that you can add or replace the Coleus you're buying every year as an annual. So this one blooms pink blooms, but I don't plant it because it's blooms. I plant it because it's foliage. Now the next two, if you're out there looking for a boxwood alternative because your local community is suffering from boxwood blight or boxwood moth, and you're noticing decline on boxwoods in your neighborhood, around you, or even at your own house, these are Inkberry hollies, which are a good alternative for boxwood because they look very similar. Now, because it is a holly, they typically like a little more acidic soil, so you would want to provide them some acidic fertilizer in spring or throughout the season to keep the pH lower. I did grow these in the last garden. I had smaller versions of them, and they grew pretty slow. So very similar in that respect to boxwoods. They might grow a little faster than boxwoods after they're established. I moved out of the last house before I really got one established, but there are two good varieties from Proven Winners, one called 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗲, which is this one right here. You can see all the beautiful, nice green foliage on it. It has a slightly broader leaf than the next one, which is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗲. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗲 has a little finer leaf on it. You'll notice there the new foliage is also a little red on it compared to the green on 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗲. I'm going to be putting most of these, I have like 5 of one variety and 3 of the other, so 8 total. A lot of these are going to be going in the front garden bed because I want to add some evergreen interest up there. I'll probably tuck a few here and there in the back garden shrub border as well, but in that location I got a lot of bigger evergreens there. So these will be nice and small, and they can be shaped just like boxwood can. So a really nice alternative if you need a boxwood alternative in your garden. And that is it. The wind is picking up, so I'm going to get these things under some water so they can get irrigated. I'm luckily pretty close to where these ship out of Michigan, so they only take a day to get here and are in really great condition every time they arrive. But you always want to give your plants a nice drink of water when they come in. And so as hot as it's going to be today, that's my next test. Follow along on the next videos as I start incorporating some of these into the garden. Probably not going to get to that today. I like to work in the morning, and it's already reaching the afternoon here, and it's getting a little warm this time of year. Thanks for joining me, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye. All right, this is a new 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗲